Hey everyone, welcome back to the March Madness bracket battle for the 2021 NCAA tournament. This is going to be our Sweet 16 recap and Elite 8 preview video combined. I was thinking about maybe doing one tomorrow if I had time, but I'm just not going to have time to do it before the games start, and it'll be weird if that goes out the day after or the day of the games. So we're here, and we're working with that now. I will say, I don't know if I'm necessarily call it cheating, but the USC and Oregon game is still going on. They're about to come out at halftime in the next little bit here. But I was scoring the brackets, and all of the games have been completed after the UCLA Alabama game, which is surprising that the USC and Oregon matchup wasn't picked by any of the brackets. But I digress. We are here. We are going to do this now just so I can get to bed a little earlier than I've been getting to bed on some of these days. And then I'll have another video for you guys coming in a couple days after the Elite 8 finishes, and then we'll do another kind of preview for the Final Four when that starts up on, I think, April 3rd is when those games begin. Yeah, those games are all on April 3rd. I guess it's just 2 games. But just moving on to our best and worst to start off, our best brackets of this round, the Sweet 16 was the chalk bracket, which has been there, I think, almost every week, if not every week or every episode that we've done this. So that one's obviously been really strong. And the scoring margin bracket, they both had 4 wins out of the possible 8, giving them 16 of a possible 32 points for this round. The worst bracket was the random numbers bracket, which got a big 0, no games correct from the random numbers bracket. So interesting to see with how strong of a start that one had into how much it's fallen. It had dropped a place every single round since that first couple rounds, like we talked about in one of those videos. So it's really started to struggle and has obviously continued that. And we'll talk a little bit more when we get to the rankings. The best region was a lot of them because they were all tied with 1 win and 1 loss. So there was none that really stood out as the definitive best. Like nothing had 2 correct wins or 2 correct games in a region. This is also the last time we'll be scoring the best and worst region because obviously there's only 1 game per region in the next round, and then after that it's just, the Final Four. So last time we'll talk about that, but we'll probably still talk about best and worst, but I feel like they're probably going to end up being kind of the same. There's probably going to be some 50-50 ones mostly, and then maybe a few that don't have any. But the worst region was the random numbers regions. Obviously, those were all 4 incorrect. 0 for, 16, or 0 for 8, excuse me. Not hitting any of those, but then there were a few others on other brackets that had 2 losses. I don't know any of them off the top of my head. I just figured I'd single out the random numbers bracket since it did so poorly. There's Brad there hanging out in his little perch. Moving to our rankings, this is obviously the name. Second column is the number of points they have currently, and it's out of 96. And then the last number there on the far right is the total number of teams left in the tournament out of a potential 8. So starting off, obviously, we have Chalk, which has been doing really well and has 52 points out of a possible 96 with 4 teams left. Points per game comes into second with 45 points and 3 teams. Then scoring margin is in third place with 42 points and 4 teams left as well. So those two, number 1 and number 3, the chalk and scoring margin, are tied for the most teams remaining left in the tournament with half. So they still have a chance to have some pretty good runs and some pretty good points totals moving forward. Fourth place, we have the wins bracket with 41 points. Fifth place, the win percentage bracket with 38. Sixth place, the losses bracket with 36. Seventh place, the coin flip bracket with 34. Eighth, the random number bracket with 28, and points per game allowed with 16 in last place. I want to go back to number 8, the random numbers bracket, which we said had 0 remaining teams, which means that for the first time in the series, or I guess the first bracket of the series to bow out, is going to be the random numbers bracket. It's still in second to last place, so it's not dead last. Points per game allowed still is behind it by 12 points, but even just 1 win, which is possible for it. So 1 win, I think, would get them close. No, they would need 2 wins in this next round, or in the next 2 rounds, which would be Houston is the only team they have left, if I'm not mistaken. And this bracket wouldn't even allow them to get there because that would mean Houston would have to win this and the Final Four. But in this bracket, they have Loyola Chicago. So we can also make a not premature, but just decision that this is going to be the bottom 2 teams. If Houston wins, you'll have 8 points added to that, which will give it 24, and then it'll be 28 points for the random numbers. But we'll check on that when we get out of the Elite Eight and talk about that some more. But like I was saying, you can see some of the other teams. Most of them have 3 teams left in the tournament. A couple of them have 4, and then Coin Flip is the only one that has 2. So that was interesting to see. Getting into some of my favorites that we'll talk about. My favorite games to watch were the Loyola Chicago and Oregon State games. The Beavers played out of their mind. Really awesome game to watch. A lot of fun. I think those were 2 really fun teams, and not 2 teams that anyone really was expecting to get this far, I think, in the tournament in terms of like a general public consensus. But it was a really fun game to watch. And then the UCLA-Alabama game that just finished up a little bit ago was also really fun. Big 3 at the end by Alabama to tie the game up, but unfortunately they weren't able to have any more success in overtime and really kind of got beat down pretty hard in overtime. UCLA came out pretty comfortably winning, which is really cool to see. It's their first time in the Elite Eight since 2008, and I was actually we were talking about in the last episode of talk show I did for my class, we were talking that there hasn't been a Pac-12 winner for the Pac-12 tournament winner since 1997, and that was Arizona. I know a couple of those Arizona teams maybe 10 or so years back did pretty well, maybe 10, 8 years, somewhere in there. They did pretty well, got to the Final Four championship game, but none of them won. So it's been a long time coming, and this might end up being the year. They've got the best, or I think the most teams left, or close to the most teams left, if I'm not mistaken, in the tournament. So they've got obviously the best statistical chance in that sense, but they obviously have to go through some tough teams. UCLA is inevitably going to have to go through Gonzaga if it ends up winning out. Whoever wins this UCLA or USC and Oregon matchup will have to go through Gonzaga at that point. And then Oregon State has Houston in the next round, which is a tough opponent as well. So we'll keep our eyes on that, like we've been saying. My standout player was Adam Flagler for Baylor, who led his team in points off the bench. So he had 16 points coming off the bench, and I think the leading starter, scored 14. So it was impressive to see. It also really shows the versatility and depth that Baylor has. That's been one of their biggest strengths so far in this tournament, and one of the things that I think will continue to play well for them going into the next couple rounds. My standout team, I kind of mentioned already, was Oregon State. They beat the number 1 defense in the nation in Loyola Chicago and did it very comfortably. I think it was almost a 10-point win, if not 10 points or more. But really strong win for them, and also one of the most underrated teams left in here, or I guess underrated going into the tournament, but they've really kicked on, especially actually even in the beginning of the season. I think they were picked to finish dead last in the Pac-12, and now they're into the Elite Eight, playing and representing that conference so well. And that kind of segues into my biggest surprise, and that's how the Pac-12 is continuing to roll on. They had 4 teams in this round itself, and already one of them has gone through, with Oregon State, obviously, like we said, 2 of them in UCLA, and the maximum they'll have is 3, because obviously in the game that's currently happening, USC and Oregon are also both Pac-12 teams, but they'll get another one through, and that would mean that the only teams that have lost so far into the Elite Eight for the Pac-12 was Colorado, who lost to Florida State, and USC or Oregon, who lost to another Pac-12 opponent. So they've had a really strong performance, and I think it's been one of the biggest surprises, not only of this round, but of the tournament. So we'll see how that end of that USC and Oregon game plays out. Won't hear about it here, but obviously I'm sure everyone else is watching along, like I will be once I finish this up. I think halftime will have definitely concluded at this point. Obviously we're running about 10 minutes so far at this, a little bit less. Going back to the rankings, I'm just getting to this on my notes, but the scoring margin bracket went up 3 places from it was tied for 5th. It is now, or tied for 5th or 6th, somewhere in there. I guess it was 6th, and went up to, I may have done my math wrong now that I'm thinking about it, but it went up to 3rd now, so a big jump for that. And then the random numbers bracket dropped from 4th all the way to 8th, which is, like we said, where it will stay for the remainder of this series. And that was one of the ones we were saying they had fallen every week since, I think, the end of the first round or something like that. So strong start, really poor finish, obviously, with them being the first bracket out of the competition so far. But like I said, it's been a lot of fun watching them. Moving on to a quick preview of the Elite Eight, if I can remember the name of the competition. We had said our review of the best bet and worst bet that we had done, which was for the Sweet 16 with Brad here. We said our best bet, that was the chalk 1 and 3 brackets, as well as the wins bracket and the scoring margin bracket would be our ones to watch, as which we would think would do the best. I'm really thinking that scoring margin is going to give the chalk bracket the best run for its money here. Obviously, we said 1 and 3 because those were the brackets with Baylor and Gonzaga, which we think, me and Brad think are the two best or most likely potential matchups. And I'm looking at the scoring margin bracket here. They have Gonzaga Houston in the final. So I guess really depending on what final national championship matchup we see is really which one of these will end up doing well, because we could end up seeing Gonzaga Baylor, like we said. We could end up seeing Gonzaga Houston, or we could see, something like Michigan Baylor, which would obviously help out those chalk brackets that we picked to do well. So I think I'm going to nix the wins bracket. It could obviously still make a pretty decent run. I don't know. Let me see here. They have Gonzaga Houston in the final as well. So that also could be something that we'll see that potentially could help that bracket out. But I think I'm going to say kind of narrow it down to the chalk 1 and 3 and the scoring margin bracket as being to potentially do the best. Our bad bet was the points per game allowed bracket, which we talked about earlier, is going to stay in last place. Even if Houston goes through in the next round, they will not be able to move any further based off of how that bracket was filled out. So that is our first for the tournament confirmed bad bet, or first confirmed bet by Brad here. So congratulations to him for being a smarty from the get-go on that one. I know we called Loyola Chicago in the Sweet 16 from the start, but obviously that didn't continue on into the next rounds. That was just kind of a first couple rounds bet, but that's pretty good call on his part. And then my Final Four really fell apart in this past one. I was being kind of bold with the bold bet that we talked about, saying that Final Four was going to be Gonzaga, Villanova, Alabama, Loyola Chicago, and I only thought that number one seed was going to get in, and now looking at that, there are 3 of those 4 out already, so that's gone completely out the window. There's still a chance that only one number 1 seed makes the Final Four, so I guess I could almost be right in that. But I think my new Final Four that I'm looking at is going to be Gonzaga, if I can find the right bracket. I think it'll be Gonzaga, Houston, Michigan, Baylor, I think. I don't know. I think UCLA could beat Michigan as well and make a Final Four push. But see, and then the Arkansas Baylor looks interesting as well. But I think, like I said, Baylor's depth is just going to be the strength that continues to play for them, and it'll continue to help out. And I'm also kind of biased because I really want to see that Gonzaga Baylor matchup that we missed in the regular season earlier this year because of COVID protocols that hit one of the programs. So I think that would be a really fun matchup to see, something that we were teased with early on in the season and have had to wait. And both these teams have continued to perform at top level and have positioned themselves in a way to end the basketball season, the Division I season, with this really big blockbuster game that everyone's been waiting for. And I guess that would be the one I'm looking for most. So I'm going to go with the 3 number 1 seeds that are remaining, which is Gonzaga, Baylor, Michigan, and then Houston, the number 2 seed. But if we're being really interesting, I'd love to see Oregon State and UCLA sneak in there. But I think inevitably I do want Gonzaga, Baylor, as much as you'd love to see the underdogs. Heck, who knows? We could get an 11-12 matchup with UCLA and Oregon State, and a Pac-12 matchup at that, as we've been talking about them already doing so well. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I will do my next video, like I said, not tomorrow, but the next day after the second set of Elite 8 games are finished, and then we'll move on from there. If you guys have been following along this whole time, I really appreciate it. Drop a like, share with your friends, continue watching. It really does mean a lot to me. I know I'm not, getting millions of views or even thousands of views or even hundreds of views, but, just knowing that there's people out there watching my content and enjoying it. If you texted me about it, I appreciate that. This isn't for class for anything other than my personal enjoyment. So, having other people that enjoy that passion, and hopefully I can give them something to look forward to and watch. It means a lot to me, and I've really enjoyed my time tracking these brackets. So that is going to wrap up everything for this video. We are looking forward to the next few games and the next few days that we'll be watching. So keep our eyes on that. You guys do as well. I hope you guys have enjoyed, like I said, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.